This RealAg Radio podcast is brought to you by Intruvix 2 herbicide from FMC. With its fast-burning activity and long-lasting systemic action, Intruvix 2 herbicide delivers consistent pre-seed broadleaf control in cereals. It's fast and it lasts. See your local retailer today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Wednesday midweek edition of the show. Thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. It is Wednesday. It's been a crazy week already. Lots happening in the world of news and specifically to agriculture and some of the impacts for the industry. We're going to dive into some of that maybe at the back end of the show today. But in the meantime, we got a great lineup of guests. Patti Durand, a great friend of the program, has a new book out all about succession planning. And here's what's unique about it. Because, a lot of times we talk about succession planning. It's kind of the same old stuff. She's written a book. It's from the perspective of the younger generation. And so those considerations are different than the older generation. Of course, the younger one, trying to take over the capital assets, trying to take over the operations. Those two things don't need to happen necessarily at the same time. But it's a critical part of the process. We'll talk to Patti about that and what are some of the considerations for that younger group. We've also got Tracy Broughton. She is the executive director with Sask Oilseeds, kind of a new branding initiative with Sask Oilseeds. Remember, Sask canola, Sask flax came together to form Sask Oilseeds. Well, they've got some new branding out, and she'll tell the story behind it. And then we've got a new Mind Your Farm business episode. We're going to play a little bit of the audio for you. It's with a lawyer out of Edmonton with MLT Aikins. It is David Kozicki. Now, David talks with me all about the handshake versus the contract. And we've got a lot of handshake agreements in the world of agriculture, and that is fine. That can stay. But when does it make sense to maybe have that agreement papered? David's going to talk to us. And also about, here's what's interesting, a lawsuit out of Saskatchewan that had to do with a grain contract that was triggered through text message because of an emoji. Whoo, boy. Who knew that a thumbs up emoji could really lead to some of the consequences? And he'll go through that court case with us as well. Now, if you have any feedback, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find Real Agriculture across all the different social media networks, or you can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Highly encourage you to download the podcast called The Agronomist. It's our live YouTube show every Monday night, 8 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Mountain, 7 o'clock for all of you in Saskatchewan in the Central Time Zone, not to lead to any confusion. And this week's episode talked all about phosphorus. Great deep dive into phosphorus. Every Monday night, Lindsay dives into, really explores a certain topic to do with agronomy. So we've covered artificial intelligence a couple weeks ago. This week was phosphorus. I'm not sure what's coming up this coming Monday, but I'm sure it will be great. You can find that podcast at the Real Agriculture YouTube channel, as well as wherever you get your podcast. We also send out an email to say, hey, there's a new episode. Also to remind you to get your CCA CU credits by watching the program. So there's a lot of benefits from watching that show. So check out the last one from Monday night. Let's take a break. When we come back, we got Patti Durand talking about succession from the perspective of the younger generation. It's now time on RealAg Radio for a product spotlight. Joined right now by Väderstad's Director of Sales for Western Canada, Philip Korzak. What are some of the things that Väderstad is up to here in 2025?
Really, we're focused on farm shows. Some people can negate the value of farm shows, but for us, it's very important to still be in front of our customers and our dealers.
What are some of the innovations and improvements that customers can look forward to, as we start to think about what some of that 2026 lineup looks like?
A couple of the few things that customers will definitely see is we've changed the tire size on our precision delivery tanks. We are bringing what we call an in-cab hub, a common connection point with our iPad displays, GPS receiver that will be easier and cleaner for the customer inside the cab to really clean those up. We will actually be bringing a new meter bottom to our tanks. Customers and dealers should look forward to that for model year 26 as well. We always encourage customers to go directly to our distributors, so that would be their local dealer. Obviously, our website is a great place to go, so vaterstad.com.
Co-op knows your community because we live here too. Our teams are your trusted partners with a range of expertise to help support your entire farm operation. And we're giving back. In the past 5 years, Co-op has invested over $1.1 billion in the prairies through building, upgrading, and expanding local facilities. And we've returned over $1.17 billion to Co-op members in the prairies. Co-op, we're all building something for the future. Here for your farm, here for your family. Learn more at coop.crs/farm.
At the Crop Production Show in Saskatoon last week, I had a chance to catch up with Patti Durand, who's had a great career in the area of financial services. She's worked with a lot of farm families about things like succession, and she's taken the time and a lot of hard work to write, get all your thoughts into a book. And she's published this book, and it's all from the perspective of the younger generation. And so I had a chance to chat with her about that perspective and what are some of the considerations for you. Okay, tell us about the book. What's it called?
The Future Leader, The Successor's Guide to Family Business Leadership, is a book that I would call it a care package for successors. It's everything I wish they knew but have recognized are often missing in the conversations and expectations.
What was the push or the, because a lot of people talk about writing a book.
Yeah.
It's no small feat. It's a lot of work. I'm sure there's a brain dump element to this where just trying to get those thoughts to paper is difficult. What was the push and the motivation for you?
A few things I would say, but primarily the fact that when I've been working as a business advisor, when I was working in coaching succession, facilitating these conversations, I was saying things on repeat. I'm like, wait a minute, these are foundational pieces of understanding that are missed. And when it became clear that it's very broad, it's a very universal issue in terms of successors navigating family dynamics and preparing themselves, I'm like, we need a resource. So I started looking for resources. They don't exist, or if they do, I haven't found them yet. And so this is my response to someone should do something.
Okay.
And I put it on paper.
So what are some of the key messages?
It is really guided to think about, I'm going to say this differently. I'd say the topics are a mile wide and an inch deep. I want to give the successors a foundational understanding of their role as successor, some self-awareness, some understanding about family dynamics, some ideas about questions they could be asking or ways to ask those questions, and then just an understanding of the difficulties that their parents are navigating in the decision-making, but also the risk of the assumptions they might make in that process.
Is it written for the older generation or the younger generation?
This book is for the successor. And I will say that I don't see a lot of advice for successors in the marketplace. I think, unfortunately or fortunately, because they are not the ones with their name on title, the successor does not have check writing authority. They don't have cash in the bank typically. Who gets attention in succession are the people that have that, and that's the older generation. And so much of this information and advice is targeted to them. You get to read for the rest of your life on that topic. When it comes to the successor, they are craving direction, and I wanted to offer them something that was in a palatable form.
Do you find that they're in a position that lacks leverage?
It can be.
And I don't mean financial leverage. I mean just the leverage to get to the other side of being the successor.
Completely. And I mean, in many cases, it comes from a parent-child dynamic, right? So the parents have the authority, they decide, and then they inform the rest of the family. And for successors who are not only needing to understand the business, learn how to make decisions within the business, and then become that leader, they are patiently waiting, and they're often told, trust us. work hard. This will all be yours. But the clarity of how that's going to happen and the dynamics of how challenging it can be seldom is revealed. And I want to give them some tools to be able to ask those questions.
From a farm business perspective or succession standpoint, do you believe in sweat equity?
Sweat equity is a reality of our culture in many cases, and it's how many farms who currently lead farms came into the business, and so it's kind of a rite of passage. Work hard, you're earning future value. You're earning, maybe not getting compensated as well right now, knowing this will all be yours. However, sweat equity is an opinion, and it is often not tracked. And so while I hear it all the time, in the book, actually, I spend some time and reference some information that Merle Good came together with in Alberta Agriculture and his work with families is, can we define sweat equity? Can we track it at some level? What does it actually mean to each individual? Not that it has to be like, down to the last decimal place, but a general gist of, yes, there's value and this is how much it is, rather than just that ambiguous, amorphous number that everybody kind of is uncertain about.
We were talking here at, we're in a seminar room. I was doing a business of farming seminar or workshop, you want to call it. We talked about current events, and then we talked about the reasons you may consider diversifying your farm. We had a lot of fun here with a great engaged group of farmers from across Saskatchewan. And when succession comes up, one of the things that was discussed from the audience and our panelists was the successor can fall into this trap of a sense of entitlement. Now, some of that is self-inflicted, but some of it can be from hearing some of that messaging of, hey, one day all this is going to be yours. And so I think it comes from couple different places, but boy, it's a dangerous spot to be if you have that sentiment.
I think it falls in the category of many assumptions that are made. Is there actually a clear path of what is yours and how this will be earned over time? Is that actually named, and is there a clear way to increase your compensation? Will there be benefits that will be included? But talking about the entitlement factor, I think that's actually something I delve into in the book is the reality is successors are probably going to be a cost to the business for quite some time. So at some point, at some level, don't think you're special. Don't think that you're so valuable. Sure, labor has value. Presence has value. You do have purpose. But to say that you are so worthy and so special is not accurate either. And so there's certainly some conversations and some self-reflection encouragement, but it's done in a story format. People look at it as kind of in the second person about this story in the book, and I'm optimistic they'll see themselves and understand how they might need to maybe take their perception and pivot a little bit.
Are there common right ways for the successor to operate, to think, to progress forward in this role as the successor?
I genuinely believe there's no one way. And I would say that people tend to crave and look for the way to transition. And it's just not the reality of how it works. Farms and these businesses are unique. Families and the number of people, the number of skill sets and abilities are unique. And so it will be most perfect for you. But that's where my hope is the outcome of the book. Well, people are like, oh, I can do this, but I got a lot of work to do. And this can be a collaborative discussion over time, so we find that most perfect way, because trying to say we just need a plan, the likelihood of hitting the target is really low. But if you think about what we need, what we're capable of, and what we need to bring on board, starts to increase the likelihood of hitting the target.
What's always kind of boggling my mind a little bit about all this is that, so we have the successor and we have what we call it, the successee? Is that what we say? I don't know. So the older generation, the ones that hold all the financial cards, the leverage, the capital, really the decision on what this path is really going to look like or how this process is going to go. Those people all at one point were also very likely the successor. Yet the same patterns repeat themselves. That's called not learning from our mistakes. Now, it's not, broad brush. I'm really broad brushing. That's not the case in all situations, but I think a majority of them. Why? What is the gap there? Why is that happening?
I think there's a lot of research in human nature that says, and I can say my own impromptu research on the number of reps with families, is that people do what they know. And so as a general rule, they tend to take the same pattern of succession to the next generation, the way that they inherited the farm. But I'll tell you, the dials have moved. The values have increased exponentially. People are living much longer. What got us here won't get us there. And so for that reason, the book, I think, could be an opportunity for everybody to pause and say, what will work best for us? That is what worked before, but also what were the missteps we made, and how might we interrupt that cycle? So pausing and naming it, that's actually a moment where I'll say, I've had farm parents read this, and they're like, first of all, I wish I had it 20 years ago when they were the successor. And second of all, it's giving us a language and some ways to open the conversation differently that we've been craving. I'll tell you this. I know these families. They are smart. They are intelligent. They are experienced, and they care. They've just never done this before. And so it's okay that they maybe are struggling and seeking some resources. And optimally, this is one of the things that might be helpful.
You've coached a lot of families on this topic. In doing the research for the book, were there any aha moments for you where you're like, really? Like maybe something you hadn't thought about it from that angle, or it was a piece of data that sort of stuck out to you, and you wish you maybe know that earlier. Any ahas in your lead up to getting the book completed?
What became clear was really important to me was that just exactly how universal the issues are in family business. So I gave myself 2 challenges. Number 1, I do not reference agriculture once in the book. This is family business. This is family dynamics.
Well, entrepreneurs.
It is entrepreneurial, for sure. Number 2, it is not, doesn't pick gender. It's universal. So in the book, the 2 characters, I actually instruct the reader, Kelly and Jordan, you get to decide if they're male or female. And not to be trendy or tricky, just that I didn't want the book someone to read it and say, well, this is about men, so it's not for me. Or vice versa. This is about women, it's not for me. Yeah. If they can pick it their own, and that's what beta readers have told me, they're like, obviously it's 2 men, or obviously it's 2 women. I'm like, oh my gosh, it worked. If I can open the door for people to understand that they're not alone, and that they have an opportunity to change the story, whatever path they're on, in positive ways, and take ownership of their own development, is a great day. And I'm hopeful for that.
Yeah. Okay. What's the name of the book again?
The Future Leader: The Successor's Guide to Family Business Leadership. And it's available at thefutureleader.ca in audiobook. So it's on Audible, it's on Kindle, it's on ebook, and you can order it in print. And I have many families that are ordering multiple copies so they can work through it as a family. And that just lights me up, because I think it can open doors that might be inaccessible otherwise, or I've witnessed them being inaccessible otherwise.
Did you read the audiobook?
I did.
How was that experience?
To get to put my expression and emphasis behind the words was more powerful than I imagined. I care about this a lot. I'm excited to put this tool in people's hands, and to have the intonation and expression was it's a pretty big deal.
Cool stuff. Hey, Patti, thanks a lot for joining us. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. I appreciate it.
Okay, lots of different places to get the book. It is Patti Durand, the author, does great work across the country helping farm families and family businesses go through this transition, because I think it's an important point. This isn't a farmer issue. This is an entrepreneur issue. Most definitely. You can talk to somebody that, family owns a hardware store or the bakery. They're going through some of the same challenges, same traps, but same opportunity for the family business to continue on to the next generation. And this book is written from the point of view of the successor, which, as Patti mentioned, not too common. So much of the focus is on the older generation, not the younger one. So this is a well-timed book, and you'd think there'd be more of these written, but Patti's really taken it upon herself to make that happen, and we do appreciate it. You can find out more by going to RealAgriculture.com. We'd love your feedback on the book. Send me an email, shaney@RealAgriculture.com. Calling all Montana, North Dakota, South Dakota, and northern Minnesota growers, the new seed omega-3 canola production system can help you unlock a guaranteed path to market with attractive premium opportunities, first-in-class agronomy support, and free on-farm pickup after harvest. That's my favorite part. I love when people just pick up the stuff from my bin, and I don't got to worry about it. To learn more, you can visit omega3canola.com. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM, right after this. Looking for proven performance in wheat? Lima Grain Cereal Seeds has you covered. With locally adapted varieties bred across key growing regions, LCS delivers top-tier genetics for winter and spring wheat. In 2024, LCS farmers swept 12 national wheat yield contest categories and won the Bin Buster Award for the 4th straight year. Learn more by going to limagraincerealseeds.com. Time to get caught up with what's going on over there at Genesis Fertilizers. Joining us right now is Terry Drabiak. There's a lot of concern right now about the stickiness of fertilizer prices and some of the volatility that's out there in the market. This is, a pathway, an opportunity to have a farmer-owned solution, or at least a part of the game.
We're building one plant, and we're building one plant for farmers. And what those two attributes bring is a security of their fertilizer. Whatever happens around the world or even back home, they'll have a secure fertilizer for their farm, and the profit stays here in Canada. Farmers are critical to this project. We call it a closed loop system, and what that means is that the people who own the plant are also the people who will take product from the plant, and that's so critical in many ways in terms of bankability, in terms of security of their supply. It's a really good model.
And make sure you go to genesisfertilizers.com for more information. And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Hey, maximize productivity and profitability with an innovative all-in-one approach to farming, combining accounting, business planning, agronomic field planning, and advanced technology. MNP Ag Intellect delivers personalized solutions that empower you to make confident, data-driven decisions. You can find out more by visiting the website mnp.ca. Okay, now last week when we were at Crop Production Show, Tracy Broughton from Sask Oilseeds and the organization unveiled some new branding, really telling the story and the combination of flax and canola within the province of Saskatchewan and what it means to consumers at the end of the day. Here's my conversation with Tracy Broughton, Executive Director with Sask Oilseeds. Now, before we get into some of your big news and some of the things Sask Oilseeds has going on branding-wise, how was Crops Forum?
It was really great. We had about 300 farmers and industry government folks that were able to join us for our Crops Forum, where we had our AGMs, annual meetings for Sask Wheat, Sask Barley, Sask Pulse Growers, and Sask Oilseeds. We also had some speakers going on.
Yeah, I had fun on the stage. I did one of the panels, and we talked about research, and we had a good laugh with it because, it was the last session of Tuesday. And I was joking about how the last session of the day, we got to hang on to this crowd talking about research. And it was awesome. People were so attentive and asked some great questions from the audience. We went for an hour and a half. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you had some really great people on the panel there. Angela Bedard-Hahn from the University of Saskatchewan, Bill Gruhl, our new Deputy Minister, and Steve Webb from the Global Institute for Food Security. So some pretty heavy hitters when it comes to, carrying out research and being a part of the funding and the strategies. It was really great. We also had Rick Hillier. He kicked it off, General Rick Hillier, and talked about leadership and how important it is for everyone to be leaders, not just, our maybe lack of leadership that we have in some areas going on right now in the world. But that was some really good takeaways for everyone in the room. And political times right now, so we had to end it off with Curse of Politics.
Yeah, that was cool. That was really cool. Yeah. My personal opinion, I'll give you my feedback while we're on the air, is I thought it was great to kind of get back to, if some people remember, some of the audience remember CropSphere. And this kind of, it felt like kind of moved back towards that. I thought it was an exceptional meeting.
Yeah, so we used to have CropSphere where we had several breakout sessions. We covered off research and agronomy, markets, and sort of those high-level policy discussions. This time we decided to keep it really simple, keep everybody in the same room instead of having breakout sessions. And I think it made it easier for the audience. We had fewer sessions, but maybe some more all-inclusive discussions and lots of networking, which is, I think, the biggest thing that everybody was missing. Last year, we were able to get through all of our AGMs in one day and made it very simple for those who are interested in the goings on of the crop commissions, but not a lot of time for networking. And that's where we all learn from each other, right?
Tracy, all of the AGMs in one day, back to back to back. That's a lot of Robert's rules.
Yes, it is. Yes. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it was and in Boomtown. So if like, and for somebody that's not from Saskatoon, I think that was really cool. The reception at the end of the first day was at Boomtown, it was at the museum right beside Prairie Land Park there. Really cool. That is a neat spot.
Yeah, the history of Saskatchewan agriculture. So we're talking about, the problems of today and how to solve them tomorrow. And also, you can look at the history of what our province has been through over the years, and it's really focused on ag.
Yeah, for sure. So big announcement, and there's a couple this week out of Sask Oilseeds, and one of them was the release of the new club route map for Saskatchewan. So encourage everybody. Did an interview on that. Go to RealAgriculture.com. But the other announcement is a little bit more broader in context. There was some branding that's been going on with Sask Oilseeds. Of course, new name for a new combined organization. So maybe give us a bit of a history there, and then we can talk about some of the branding going outwards.
So the way that our organizations are all set up, with the exception of Saskatchewan Pulse Growers, most of our organizations are set up by crop type. So we had Sask Canola, which I'm sure that everyone's familiar with, and Sask Flax. Over the years, the organizations have become more mature, and as a result, we are doing a lot of the same things. We work together on a lot of things. The flax industry has taken a bit of a hit with the drought, and there haven't been a lot of new varieties coming through for farmers to access. And so a lot of their budget was being taken up by administration and operations of the organization proper. And so a couple of years ago, their ED had moved on, and our board of directors instructed me to reach out and ask if they would be interested in some sort of new approach to how we do business. So we operated with one staff and two boards for a couple of years, and in that time explored what amalgamation would look like. We went through all the process, as you mentioned, a lot of Robert's rules and governance, and so there was some process that we had to get through our AGMs and resolution and consultation with our members. And as of August 1st, we've been calling ourselves the Saskatchewan Oilseed Development Commission, or Sask Oilseeds. And that gave us some time to update some of our marketing. So we now have a brand for both organizations, and we launched that as of January 15th with our annual report. And our AGM, we were able to present the final set of financials for Sask Canola and Sask Flax.
Now, there isn't a lot of soybeans in the province of Saskatchewan, but they're over at Sask Pulse, right?
They are, yeah. The way that our province defines it is more from a botanical standpoint rather than end use.
Well, you steal those over to your side.
Well, let's talk to the farmers about that.
Carl may have something to say about that. Yeah. Sorry, Carl. Okay, so now you got to we're doing this via Zoom, and you got a T-shirt on that's showing some of the branding. So talk about kind of what you announced this week.
Yeah. So in the past, the Sask Canola brand and the Sask Flax brand really focused on the flowers of each of the crops. I think that's what everybody thinks of when they think of those two crops visually. Yeah. And it would have been really busy to start adding in a bunch of flowers, and we thought we want to keep it really simple, and we don't want our logo to be our brand. So we talked with a marketing agency here locally in Saskatoon, and they came up with an icon that it represents what we do, which is invest in research. It signifies a seedling because we're about crop research, a book, which is about knowledge and research. And then we also included an oil drop for the flax and canola. It could also be viewed as like a seed as well. And it's encased in the province of Saskatchewan because we are provincial.
Yeah. And what was some of the reaction? Did you unveil it then at Crops Forum?
Yeah. I think we had quite a bit of positive reaction. One of the things that we have also changed is we went away from, having blue or purple and yellow in our logos. Our colors are green and like a neutral color, but that's because we want something that will look really nice when we're showing the photos of the flax fields and the canola fields. And so that was really on purpose. It's allowing us to have a really good nod to both of those crops, because that's what we all think of as those beautiful fields of canola and flax.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, as in the summertime, if you time it right and you're flying into Saskatoon, and on the approach, you look out the window and you see, the beautiful colors. It's really flax and canola that, provide that contrast to the green of most of the other crops that we're growing. It's that yellow that just shines so bright, and the flax fields are, they provide that nice contrast too. It's really kind of it's interesting that both those two beautiful flowered crops are under one banner at Sask Oilseeds.
Yeah, it's giving us a bit of an opportunity. Like, there's efficiencies that are gained with respect to like policy and things like that, and even just on the research side, there are efficiencies to be gained. But then we're also able to expand. Like, we haven't talked a lot about breeding efforts in canola, because that's all carried out in the private sector. Any of the research that we invest in would be more like a pre-breeding, like very early stages. So it's a good opportunity for our staff and our board to get exposed to the variety development side of things as well. So it's kind of interesting.
Yeah, we've got about a minute left here for talking to all the different growers this week. What feels like kind of the sentiment here for 2025 for the crop year?
Well, I think lots of people were talking about some of the changes that we're going to see in the political landscape, what the U.S. tariffs, if they come through, what that's going to look like. Lots of guessing around that, and then our own federal government here in Canada. So I feel like there wasn't a lot of discussion other than what the impacts of some announcements in the U.S. would have had on the canola markets. They're not quite ready to talk about, or they weren't at the Western Development Museum. They weren't talking about the field season quite yet.
That Bunge-Viterra merger too. There's that.
Yeah, that's something that I think there were a lot of things we were guessing on for several months, and now even though the government is not operating right now, they were able to bring forward a decision on the Bunge-Viterra merger. So
did Sask Oilseed have a position on that? On that merger?
No, we didn't have a position on that merger, specifically because there were so many things up in the air. We did give feedback to the Competition Bureau directly, and we had farmers able to provide feedback on their individual, trucking situations, delivery options, and how it might impact things. But we leave a lot of that forward-looking advocacy efforts for national or federal government to our national organizations to kind of take the lead on.
That was the Executive Director of Sask Oilseeds, Tracy Broughton. When we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to dig into the difference between the handshake and the contract, and how do you protect yourself in your next business deal for your farm. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
What's next doesn't happen by accident, doesn't happen by chance.
What's next happens when experience meets expertise, when data meets dollars, and when steel meets earth.
What's next happens when the promising work of Pioneer's state-of-the-art research centers meets the unsparing challenges of more than 17,000 on-farm trials.
Our ultimate goal is to bring the next seed breakthrough to your field.
Because Pioneer isn't just our name.
It's our mission. Pioneer.
What's next
happens here.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
For every acre, every row, every seed, precision wins every time. Only Seedmaster delivers unmatched accuracy for better yields and bigger profits. Seedmaster, driven by precision, leading the way in seeding innovation. At RealAgriculture.com, we do a Mind Your Farm business podcast. Encourage you to check it out. You could, wherever you get your podcast, just search Mind Your Farm Business. I love that name. Great name. And we also post the episodes on YouTube. I think we're in like season 8 of this farm business focused podcast. And the last episode, we did an interview with David Kozicki. He's a lawyer out of Edmonton with MLT Aikins. And we talked about like the handshake versus the written contract. And I know in agriculture, we've got a ton of handshake deals. And then that's just the way that we do business in this industry. It's a people kind of business. But maybe it shouldn't be the way we go all the time. Well, where's sort of that line? And how do we view this issue here in 2025? Hey, I should mention the Mind Your Farm Business Podcast is brought to you by RBC Royal Bank as well. So big shout out to RBC Royal Bank for being the sponsor of the Mind Your Farm Business Podcast. Let's hear part of my conversation with David Kozicki.
And this doesn't have to be like an all or none scenario. I am sure there are still, in today's world, agreements where they can be a handshake. But let's talk about that a little bit. When is a handshake deal appropriate? Or when should is there like a trigger or a line where we're like, you know what, just for the both of our sake, maybe we should have a formal contract?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it really comes down to you've got to analyze the situation that you're trying to create and decide how much risk is involved in the transaction, what's at stake, and how much of that risk you're willing to expose yourself to. It's first of all, you gotta peel off a number of contracts that have to be in writing. Okay, so things with government, anything to do with government subsidies, that type of stuff, typically all has to be in writing. Anything dealing with land, the sale of land must be in writing. Anything to do with third parties. So if you're bringing in banking or financing or investors into a transaction, 99% of the time, there's going to have to be a formal contract involved. So if you strip all that stuff aside, I think the first important concept to look at is obviously the relationship of the parties. There's obviously a big difference between, two families or two farmers that have lived and worked together for perhaps multi-generational, and every year they do the same deal. I buy something from you, you sell it to me, I pay you, and we do it on a handshake. Yeah. Versus, entering into an agreement with a new entity or new person to the community or a large national corporation that you've never done business with before. There's that trust factor that's got to be earned before you feel more comfortable doing it on a handshake type deal. I think the second is probably the complexity of the transaction. So when you start dealing with extremely large sums of money or large quantities of unknown product, such as in grain type transactions, there's a big difference between buying and selling equipment or a known product versus, a multi-year land lease to buying and selling an agribusiness. There's just a number of different factors that come into play. So you really have to analyze, look, do I fully understand the complexity of what I'm trying to accomplish with the other person or the other party? And have we hammered out all the fine details that could come back later and cause us issues?
Materiality, like you mentioned that, if we're talking like a small amount of money, lower risk, if if the deal goes entirely sideways, I'm not exactly out, I'm not losing my business. That's different than something where, man, if this goes sideways, I am like in a lot of trouble. Those are two, and of course there's a big gray area in the middle of that. Curious, should you be offended even if you've been maybe it's a new company or a new entity you're doing a deal with, or maybe it's a neighbor you've been doing business with a long time. That's probably more the case. Should you be offended if they say, you know what, for both of us, I actually would like this in writing?
I don't think so. I think, especially in today's day and age where it becomes very easy to do some sort of formal written, not even formal, informal, but written communication, an email, a text, something along those lines, just to set the parameters under which the deal is done, to ensure that both parties are fully aware of the terms. It protects both parties. It adds as a reminder down the road, especially if you're looking at a longer term type transaction. It just sets the facts that, hey, this is what we agreed to. See, remember, this is what we texted. You communicated back and said, hey, yeah, I agree. So we've got a basis of a record of the agreement that we came to. And that's kind of the additional factor you've got to look at is the timeline of the transaction, right? You can go down the road, if you're looking to lease a piece of land for a short term versus an extended period where your business depends on having access to that land for a long period of time, there's a big difference there. Transition of estates, that becomes a big issue, right? If, often we'll see situations where mom and dad are getting up in years, multiple kids, some of which stay on the farm and some don't. And there is a verbal promise of, hey, if you stay and work the land, the whole farm will be yours one day.
I have first right of refusal.
First right of refusal. I have an option. Dad said the land is mine.
Yeah.
We had a case once where the elderly parents, their goal was to make sure the land would never be developed. It was starting to get closer and closer to an urban center.
Yeah.
But they didn't do anything formal about it, and you're just leaving it on the trust of that your next of kin or your kids or your beneficiaries are going to actually follow those wishes. So anything really long term you got to watch out for. And then the second is volatility, which, of course, the agricultural business is full of it with weather and crop failures and market volatility. High volatile transactions probably should be a little more formalized than just a handshake.
I think, too, I was just thinking about this from just making up an example, volume of the number of transactions that you're doing. So, for example, I'm a feed yard and I'm buying feeder cattle. If I'm buying feeder cattle in one transaction from one rancher, I can probably keep it straight in my head. Now, if I've got 100 of those and all of those are at different prices and different delivery dates, that volume works against me trying to keep it all straight in my brain. Even if I think I'm the sharpest person out there, we can get kind of mixed up. Was that person or was it that person? Oh man, now that you ask that, then nothing worse in a deal than going back to the person and saying, do you remember what we agreed to? And listen, we've all been there. That's just human nature and that happens. So I think the volume or number of transactions would definitely be a factor here too.
Well, absolutely. And there's also the practicality when you're dealing with large volumes that your back office or your accounting department in particular is not going to get happy when all of a sudden hundreds or thousands of transactions start rolling through and there's not a lick of paper on any of them.
Yeah. And characteristics too. When the price is determined by characteristics, like there's sliding scale based on weight, or there's sliding scale based on quality, which can happen in grain, for example, things like that. Those characteristics, the more of those kind of deals, that also would be a factor for sure.
Yeah.
So, David, where I'd like to go next is we've talked about some made up examples, but I know you worked on you brought into this discussion an actual example of something happening, and this could happen to really any of us, and it showcases the downside in this issue between handshake and what's a deal versus an actual contract. So let's look at the example. It's actually from recent history.
Yeah, it's an incident that took place in 2021, and it's not specifically a handshake deal, but it does represent the risks of informality in contracts. So I recently went to court in 2023 in a very simple fact pattern, to be honest. It's called the Southwest Terminal case. Basically, Southwest Terminal was a grain buyer, and they were buying grain from a rather large producer. Southwest Terminal's agent sent out a text blast, as I'm sure many people do these days, to all their producers saying, hey, we're looking for November flaxseed at $17 a bushel. And this was in March of 2021. The producer got back in touch with them. The father that ran the company got back in touch with the agent for the buyer. They had a good discussion. We're interested. Looks good so far. The buyer then calls the farmer's son, who is the decision maker of the corporate farming company, and had a discussion with him. And yep, this looks good. Get a contract done up. Let's get her done. The buyer's agent then goes back, prepares the formal contract. Somewhat important to note, it's a 2-page contract. The front is all the specific terms, and the back is your standard terms and conditions that would apply to any deal. The buyer's agent then takes a picture of that front page, texts it over to the son, who then quickly responds with a thumbs up emoji. Fast forward the clock, November rolls around, there's a crop failure, and flax is now $41 a bushel, so up 240%. The producer doesn't provide on the contract, doesn't deliver. So now they go to court. Because, of course, the buyer's sitting there thinking we've got a valid contract, and the producer's saying, no, we didn't have a contract.
So that thumbs up could mean, hey, let's do the deal, or it could be thumbs up, hey, I received what you sent me.
Well, and that's a lot where the case turned. So a lot of the discussion in the case was about, okay, what does a thumbs up emoji mean? Even looking at definitions and past usages and what does it come down to?
Young people actually tell me we're not even supposed to use thumbs up emojis, but that's a whole other discussion. Sorry, continue.
And then the other major factor that came into play here was the buyer's agent and this farming company, specifically the son, had a long-standing relationship. So 9 or 10 years old. And in fact, there was 3 or 4 recent incidences reported between the two where a contract was basically signed almost the exact same way. Text over a picture of the contract. But in all of those, it was responded with words. Looks good. Okay. Yup. And in all of those, the farmer delivered on the contract. So looking at that in totality, you'd be thinking, hey, slam dunk. This must be an agreement. On the farmer side of the coin, they look at the situation and they responded with, well, no, there wasn't a whole lot of time between receiving that contract and me giving the thumbs up where you couldn't have reasonably believed I had a chance to look at it. You only sent me the front page. You didn't send me the standard terms and conditions. And all 3 of those prior contractual relationships you referred to was all for grain on hand. It was not pre-harvest or pre-production grain. And any time that I do those type of contracts, I want an act of God or a force majeure provision which protects me in the event of a crop failure. So that was the defense on the other side. Basically, that there was an uncertainty of terms, which goes back to those 4 pillars, and therefore no contract.
Is that ultimately what was decided? No contract?
No. Ultimately, the court looked at it, and they ultimately decided there was a contract.
Oh, wow.
That due to the totality of all the events, including that long history and the prior examples of how they've done business before, that it was a binding contract. And what's somewhat interesting about the case is most provinces now can have a electronic document or electronic execution act, which deals with documents that are transmitted electronically and signed electronically. And the judge even went so far as to say, in this case, in this fact pattern, that thumbs up emoji is tantamount to a signature. It's a digital signature in that specific fact scenario. One of the other, if you remember, we went back, or earlier we talked about certain situations where a contract or at least a written document is required, and a lot of the provinces carry sale of goods acts, which require something in writing signed to satisfy that requirement. This agreement fell under that act as well, and the court found that, well, it was in writing, and that thumbs up was a signature to the agreement.
That was an excerpt of a recent Mind Your Farm Business episode. Our guest was David Kozicki of MLT Aikins out of Edmonton. Interesting stuff there on the grain contract and the emoji. Something to definitely be paying attention to and how you are conducting your own business. Encourage you to go and find the Mind Your Farm Business podcast, specifically this episode, and hear the entire conversation that I had with David. And of course, the Mind Your Farm Business podcast is brought to you by RBC Royal Bank. We'll be back here on RealAg Radio right after this. RealAg Radio is Canada's only daily radio show focused on agriculture. Get expert advice on Agronomic Monday. Tuesdays and Wednesdays we'll cover a broad range of issues. Thursday we'll hear from farmers across the country on the Farmer Rapid Fire. And we'll wrap things up Fridays with the Real Ag Issues panel with Kelvin Hefner and Lindsay Smith. Join us Monday through Friday at 4:30 Eastern. And don't forget about the replay at 7 in the morning on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
FP Genetics brings new seed genetics to Canadian farms, empowering growers to thrive in ever-changing conditions. We are committed to helping farmers thrive with superior genetics, developing customer strategies to build best practices, all tailored to individual needs. Visit fpgenetics.ca to discover FP's dynamic portfolio of wheat, durum, barley, oats, peas, and rye, and to contact your local territory manager. FP Genetics. Gain a genetic advantage, experience the next wave.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. And again, make sure you download that episode of the Mind Your Farm Business podcast we just listened to with David Kozicki of MLT Aikins. Hey, this segment's brought to you by Alpine Liquid Fertilizers, your full season crop fertility specialist from start to finish. Make sure you go to the Nature's Alpine website to find out more. We got some feedback here from Corey. I'll read a portion of it. There's a number of different points that Corey hits on. I know Corey listens to the show all the time, farmer from Saskatchewan. He says, I think anti-American sentiment is much stronger in Eastern Canada than West. The we are better than them attitude is strong in Ontario and Quebec particularly. Western Canada still has more of the conquer the frontier approach and proud and free, sort of the proud and free character. A question on the tariff discussion. If the public position is that tariffs essentially just tax the American consumer of our products, why even discuss retaliatory tariffs on incoming U.S. products that would then tax Canadian consumers? Wouldn't a better approach be essentially one like Danielle Smith appears to be talking? For example, beef up our border issues and try to demonstrate to the U.S. how they need our oil and other products, because they do. Appreciate the email, Corey. I think one of the big questions there, our audience is definitely divided on this issue for sure. I appreciate your perspective. I think one of the issues or one of the big questions is, even if Canada, and Canada is beefing up some of the border issues, so the Black Hawk helicopters, which I've actually seen fly over Lethbridge. There was 3 last week. I know Kelvin saw some in Manitoba. So they're out and about. There is talk about putting some of the Alberta sheriffs on a 4-kilometer zone north of the 49th parallel. I guess time will tell if that's actually the issue. Or is that just sort of a distraction? Is that just sort of a thing for us to chase our tails, to run around with chickens with our head cut off? I'm not saying we shouldn't do those things. I think we should. But we're going to see if that actually mitigates the opportunity for tariff. Because even with the purchase of the Black Hawk helicopters, for example, the tariff talk hasn't necessarily gone away. So from a Canadian-U.S. perspective, is it about illegal drugs crossing the border? Is it about illegal immigrants crossing the border? Now, I think in Mexico's case, you could argue, yeah, there's a lot. The U.S.-Mexico issues are a lot different than the Canada-U.S. issues. We're being kind of thrown in the same barrel. We have issues with the U.S. that need to be figured out and sorted out, but I'm not sure what's being presented as the problem is actually the problem that we should be trying to solve. And it's going to be really up to the Canadian negotiators to sort all of that out. Danielle Smith, Premier of Alberta, definitely, I've heard from a lot of you, some of you strongly against what she's been doing, and some of you very much cheerleading what she is doing. Keep that feedback coming. In order to do that, if you haven't been sending me emails and things like that, you can send, my email address, I should say, is shaney@realagriculture.com. You can find Real Agriculture across all the different social media platforms, so Instagram, TikTok, Threads, X, YouTube. We're on all of them. You can also call the Real Ag feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with Real Ag Radio, and we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this Real Ag Radio podcast, brought to you by Intruvix 2 herbicide from FMC. Intruvix 2 herbicide for cereals delivers outstanding pre-seed control of the toughest broadleaf weeds like kochia, volunteer canola, and narrow-leaved hawksbeard. See your local retailer today.